Hi everyone, it's Jenny at jccards.com and I'm back today with a video that shows you in a bit more detail the Distress Oxide Emboss Resist on coloured cardstock technique that I showed you in a previous video. Today I'm changing it up a little bit and using more masculine colours, so let's get started. So I'm using the Nature Mandala background stamp from Simon Says Stamp. I absolutely love this stamp. It is so detailed and you just don't want to cover any of it up. I think it's by Stephanie Lowe, designer, and I love all of her stuff. I love the way she creates kind of mandalas and kind of detailed geometric patterns with hidden images. It's really clever. So to start off with, I've got a 6 by 6 inch square of jelly bean cardstock. This is by Simon Says Stamp, which I think they may have discontinued now, unfortunately, but any bright cardstock will do for this technique. The key to it is to use a contrasting colour to the inks that you're going to use. So in today's card, I'm using a bright cardstock with darker inks, but you could probably also use a dark cardstock with brighter inks. Distress oxides are opaque, so they will cover over the coloured cardstock. I'm stamping the mandala image in embossing ink and I'm then going to heat emboss it in clear. What the clear embossing powder, once it's heated, does is it traps any colour or anything that's underneath that embossing powder once it's heated, and you can go over it with ink and the embossing powder will resist that ink and you'll be able to see through the clear embossing powder to whatever the colour is beneath it. So you may have seen this done in the past on pattern paper with clear embossing powder and distress inks, and I wanted to try it with coloured cardstock and the oxides because, as mentioned, they are opaque. So I've heat embossed the mandala image and I'm using distress oxides in a variety of greens. I'm first off using cracked pistachio, which is a really nice kind of greyish, greenish, light greenish colour. And I'm using some post-it tape just to protect my fingertips from smearing the ink everywhere. And I'm going very liberally with, it's a makeup blender brush. They're similar to the Picket Fence Studios brushes that came out recently, which I haven't tried. They're probably better than these. However, I am really loving these brushes. They are amazing for blending. They actually have changed my blending life. And I'm going really, really liberally with the ink over the entire image, just covering the cardstock completely. I'm now moving on to Lucky Clover, which is a nice deep bright green colour. And I've changed my blender brush. I'm still using the 3M tape to protect my fingers. And you'll notice I'm not being particularly careful here. You'll see why when we come to the end of this technique. But I'm going round the edges of the image. So I'm trying to get the Lucky Clover about halfway up into the centre of the image, and where there is not a very good blend, I can go back in with my cracked pistachio blender brush. I haven't reloaded it, and just blend it out a little bit in the centre. Now I was going to go with Stormy Sky for the edge, however when I applied it, it wasn't dark enough to actually cover over the Lucky Clover. So I had to think, and then I ended up going with Ground Espresso, which, as I'm going for more masculine colours on this card, thought that was quite a masculine colour, and it really does add a nice deep dark contrast to the green. So you'll see I'm going in with a smaller blender brush and I'm making sure that the Ground Espresso goes over probably about half an inch, maybe a third of an inch of the tips of the outer edge of the mandala. And then I'm just going back in with the Lucky Clover and blending it a little bit more. And then again, just to make sure, going back in again with the cracked pistachio. And that finishes the blending portion. Now we take a dry cloth and we buff it. And you'll see this amazing pattern suddenly reveal itself. And you can see, for example, where we had quite rough blending around the edges of the mandala with the Ground Espresso, now the edges are almost perfect. And what you get, if you look very closely, because this is obviously a very detailed image, in the little wells between the embossing powder, there is Lucky Clover, there's Ground Espresso, and towards the centre there's cracked pistachio. If you used an image that was less detailed than this, it would be much more obvious, and you'll see that in the purple card I created using a similar technique on my last video. Just to add a little bit of a distressed look, I spritzed it with a couple of spritzes of clear water, which I lifted off with a paper towel, and you can see because Distress Oxide is water reactive, it leaves a few speckles behind, and I just added a very short blast with my heat tool to dry it off. Now, the reason I stamped this onto a 6x6 piece of cardstock was because I wasn't sure how much of the image I was going to use for my card. So I find it helpful if I use a rectangular die and just place it over the image, and then I can determine, okay, what area do I want this? Do I want it vertical, horizontal, center? And I decided to go with it slightly off to one side. This rectangle die, it's Hero Art's Infinity Rectangle dies, and it is the 4 by 5¼ inch. And then I matted it onto some more jelly bean cardstock, which was cut to the size of an A2 size card panel. I'm now going back in with some of the inks and an ink dauber and just highlighting some of the pieces of the images that I felt kind of were getting a little bit lost because it's such a detailed image. So I used the ground espresso right in the center with an ink dauber and then just blended it out slightly with my fingertips. And then I used Lucky Clover on the, I think they're mushrooms or toadstools that go around the sort of middle of the mandala itself, and then blended them with my fingertip. I'm also adding some clear Wink of Stella onto the florals that are above the toadstools, and that's a look at the background. Now for my sentiment, I'm using the Thankful To die, which is by CZ Design for Simon Says Stamp, and I'm running the first layer through using a scrap of jelly bean cardstock. I think I've basically used up all my jelly bean cardstock now. I love my jelly bean cardstock. So I'm running it through my mini blossom, which I haven't used that much in videos. I don't think I've used it in videos at all, but I love it. It's so good. And then I'm running the background piece through with some translucent wood grain paper, which I think came in a Hero Arts monthly kit. And it's just slightly translucent, but I thought the wood grain kind of tied in really well with the nature theme of the mandala. And then I'm just using my pick to push out the die cuts, and I'm going to adhere them together with liquid adhesive. The glue of choice for me is art glitter glue. You've probably seen me use it in tons and tons of videos. It is amazing. Guys, get art glitter glue. It dries clear, it sticks straight away, it never clogs, maybe once. It's amazing. Okay, so for my final sentiment, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp CZ Design Simple Sentiments 2. And to create my sentiment strip, I just rubbed some ground espresso on the back of my other part of my project. I didn't keep it for another card, but you totally could have. And then just dry it, make sure it's very, very dry, and use a powder bag. Otherwise, you know, your powder will stick where you don't want it. And I stamped the You Are So Kind in embossing ink and heat embossed it with white embossing powder. I'm then going to add a strip of foam tape on the back, and I pop it up here. I do go back in off camera and add another layer of foam tape under the middle just so that the sentiment strip doesn't sag. I'm using Nina Solar White 110 pound for my card base, and I'm using up that fun foam. I've got some green craft foam by Darice, which I've adhered to the back, and then using double-sided tape I'm going to adhere it down onto my card base. As a finishing touch, I'm going to add some pearl confetti honeybee sequins using my trusty jewel picker and my art glitter glue, and that finishes the card. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you give this technique a try. If you have enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love it if you did. And press the bell to be reminded when I have a new video. Here's a couple of other videos you may enjoy, and have a wonderful new year. I'll see you next year in 2019. Thanks everyone. Bye.